Ang pag-uusapan natin ngayon ay ang substantive and remedial law. When we speak of substantive and remedial law, dapat bisitahin natin yung concept of due process under the Bill of Rights of our 1987 Constitution. Kasi substantive law talks about rights. Well, remedial law also talks about rights in a way. And the basis of all of this is the due process clause of the Constitution that is found in Section 1 of Article 3 in the first part, which says, "No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." So substantive and procedural laws flow from the due process clause. Ang pagkakaiba ng dalawa is that substantive laws create rights, while procedural laws and rules protect rights. Substantive laws are created by the legislature, while procedural rules are crafted by the Supreme Court. Now, in connection with this, we have to understand the difference between substantive and procedural due process. In the case of Alliance for the Family Foundation Philippines versus Honorable Janet L. Gagarin, a 2017 case, this was discussed by the Supreme Court. By the way, this case was cited in my virtual textbook, which you can find in www.profchato.com. Again, www.profchato.com. Puntahan lang ninyo yung URL na yon so that you can study procedural rules in my virtual textbook. So again, balik tayo sa Alliance for the Family Foundation versus Gagarin. Ito yung sinabi ng Supreme Court. Due process of law has two aspects, substantive and procedural. In order that a particular act may not be impugned as violative of the due process clause, they must comply with both substantive and procedural requirements. Pag sinabi nating substantive due process, this refers to the intrinsic validity of a law. It refers to the essence of the law. Pag sinabi nating procedural due process, it means compliance with procedures or steps prescribed by statute in conformity with the standard of fair play and without arbitrariness on the part of those who are called to administer it. I'm sure you have come across that well-known decision that says, by due process, we mean a law which hears before it condemns, a law which proceeds upon inquiry, and renders judgment only after trial. It contemplates an opportunity to be heard after due notice. Now, another reason why we should distinguish between substantive and remedial law refers to the application of the law. If it is a substantive law, it must be of prospective application. It must apply in the future, meaning after the law was passed. It must apply to incidents and occurrences that took effect or that happened after the substantive law was passed. On the other hand, pag sinabi nating remedial law, it can apply to cases and matters that are already pending, as of the time the remedial law was passed. So, substantive laws are to be applied prospectively, while remedial laws may be applied retroactively unless vested rights are going to be impaired. Dun sa aking virtual textbook, meron naman akong sinite na another case that's Spouses Marian B. Lintag et al. Versus National Power Corporation, a 2007 case. This case involved Republic Act number 8974. This law facilitates the acquisition of right-of-way, site, or location for national government infrastructure projects. So ang issue sa kasong ito is whether or not RA 8974 is substantive or remedial. If it is substantive, it cannot be applied retroactively. If it is remedial, it can be applied retroactively. So what happened in this case? The petitioners in this case are spouses. They own a parcel of land measuring 80,000 square meters. The National Power Corporation needed to establish an easement of right-of-way over a certain portion of their land, measuring 8,000 square meters. So ang ginawa ng National Power Corporation, nag-deposit siya with the bank of the initial assessed value of 2,469 pesos. And then The proceedings were held before the RTC on an expropriation case, and the RTC directed the NPC to pay the petitioner's spouses 49,665.63 pesos. Ano tong amount na to? Ito yung just compensation. Ito yung amount na damage na mai-incur or na-incur ng spouses due to the improvements on the property. So, nag-rule na yung Regional Trial Court. Okay, NPC, magbayad kayo sa spouses ng 49,665 pesos as just compensation. Now, 2 months after the RTC's ruling, Republic Act 8974 took effect. And under this law, iba naman yung basis ng just compensation. Ang basis is the zonal valuation determined by the Bureau of Internal Revenue. And given the zonal valuation for that particular area, ang dapat bayaran nung nag-expropriate is 5.6 million pesos. So, ang question dito, kung ang RA 8974 will be applied retroactively, the petitioner's spouses will be entitled to just compensation of 5.6 million pesos. But if RA 8974 is to be applied prospectively, the petitioner's spouses will be entitled to 49,000 pesos as just compensation. So, nung nag-rule yung RTC in favor of the spouses, an appeal was filed by the NPC and the Court of Appeals reversed the ruling. Ang sabi ng Court of Appeals, hindi natin pwedeng i-apply yung RA 8974 retroactively because it is a substantive law. So this was the issue that was brought before the Supreme Court. Ano ba ang RA 8974? Is it a substantive law or is it a remedial law? Again, if it's substantive, it can be applied prospectively only. If it is remedial, it can be applied to the existing case, meaning retroactively. Anong naging ruling ng Supreme Court? Sabi ng Supreme Court, it is a substantive law. Bakit? Because it creates rights. It creates rights in favor of the person who owns the property sought to be expropriated. And because it creates rights, it cannot be applied retrospectively. Besides, there is nothing in Republic Act 8974 that provides for a retroactive application. So sabi ng Supreme Court, if the rule takes away a vested right, it is not procedural. Conversely, if a rule or law creates a right, it should be properly appreciated as a substantive law or rule in nature. It is indubitably a matter is substantive when it involves the creation of rights to be enjoyed by the owner of the property sought to be expropriated. The right of the owner to receive just compensation prior to the acquisition of possession by the state of the property is a proprietary right, appropriately classified as a substantive matter and thus within the sole province of the legislature to legislate on. And then the Supreme Court continued, it is well entrenched that statutes, including administrative rules and regulations, operate prospectively unless the legislative intent to the contrary is manifest by the express terms or by necessary implication, because the retroactive application of a law usually divests rights that have already become vested. This is based on the Latin maxim, lex prospicit non respisit. The law looks forward, not backward. Sana may natutunan kayo dito. Till the next video. If you want to get more videos that will help you in your law studies, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Feel free to share this video with your classmates in law school and bar review classes. You can also read my virtual textbook on civil procedure at www.profchato.com. I pray for success in your studies. And finally, I'd like to share my favorite Bible verse with you. Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. That's from Micah chapter 6, verse 8.